I had a friend who was in the Imperial Valley, Hashim Sidat. He was a physician. He was a gastroenterologist and an acupuncturist and a homeopath. And he was a really amazing doctor. And he traveled all over. He was very interested in all kinds of medicine modalities. But he called me to tell me that there was a man there who was visiting him named Bashir Uthman Bashir. And he said to me, I think I have this wali in my house, but I can't understand him. Could you come down and translate for me? So I went down and I said, who is he? He's from Eritrea, but he lives in Medina. I said, what's his name? He said, Bashir Uthman Bashir. I said, I know that man. He's an incredible man. He's really a remarkable person. So I went down, and he was the one that convinced me to stay there and go to nursing school and do this. And I actually studied with him. I used to do rounds with him at the hospital. So I was studying there, and Sheikh Bashir, who has an amazing story, because he told me, and Dr. Omar Abdullah Farouk knows this because he was very close to him. He told me that when he was a young man, he was in Eritrea, he was a very wealthy man, and he had a teacher there, his sheikh, told him that the communists are going to take over Eritrea. He said, you're going to have to leave, you're going to lose everything, but don't worry, you're going to have an opening in Medina, and you're going to live in Medina, and you'll have a very good life there, and you're going to die and be buried in Baqi'. That's what he told me. God is my witness, he told me that. And he said that initially he thought his sheikh was like, what's this? This tradition was called kashf, which doesn't mean he knows the unseen. It's just sometimes there's an unveiling that Allah will give certain people, so they say things that actually end up happening. It's called a kashf. It's well known, and some people have. Mauritanians know about this because there's people of kashf in Mauritania. It's an unveiling that God gives some people. And so he told him this, and he thought, that sounds so far-fetched. Sure enough, they came. He lost everything. He was a wealthy businessman who had business in Arabia. He ends up going to Medina. That's where I met him. And then Dr. Omar wrote me a letter, which I have here in filed away. Wrote me a letter in Arabic giving me how he died. So he left there. It turned out he had cancer. And we had flown to New Mexico. I flew with him to New Mexico. And I remember when the plane landed in Las Vegas, and I said, isn't it amazing how these mountains, they look just like Mecca? And he said, no, don't compare anything to Mecca, like Las Vegas. So I was like, astaghfirullah. This is the adab of the people of Allah. But we went to New Mexico, and then he went back. He was in Jeddah, and he was inside a hospital in Jeddah, and his son was with him. This is Bashir Uthman Bashir. He woke up. He ripped out the IVs, and he said, take me to Medina right now. And Dr. Omar wrote all this in the letter to me. He said, take me to Medina right now. He said, Baba, you're sick. He said, if you don't take me to Medina right now, you're not my son. And so he took him. He did the kalima the whole way. They literally got to Medina, and he took his last breath. On Yom al-Jum'ah, this was at Fajr, Yom al-Jum'ah, he was buried at Dhuhr and prayed over in the Masjid of the Prophet and buried in Baqi'. It's a true story. I'll tell you another story with Sheikh Bashir Uthman Bashir. I wasn't planning on going here, but we might as well since we're here. I'll tell you another amazing story about him. I was with Dr. Omar Abdullah Farouk, Sheikh Omar, who I can testify, I think he's the most extraordinary American Muslim that I know. And I've known him for 40 years. He lived in Jeddah. He taught in Arabic for 17 years. He taught Aqidah in Saudi Arabia for 17 years. Amazing. And he's very well respected by the Saudis. He's a brilliant man. I once asked him, is it true you know 17 languages? He said, do you count the dead ones or just the living? But anyway, so he said, we're going to go. We were staying at Sheikh Uthman Bashir's house, beautiful Eritrean man. And so he said, let's go to Badr. We'll go visit Badr. It's an amazing place, because I'd never been to Badr. So we're driving to Badr. And I had this cotton robe, because I only wore cotton. I didn't like the polyester when I lived in the Gulf. I never wore the polyester robes. I always had cotton. And I had this really nice cotton robe that I liked a lot. So we're driving, and on the halfway there to Badr, there's a car flipped over. It was a Chevy Impala, very heavy half-ton cars, and it was flipped over, but it was an accident. We were seeing it for the first. So he literally pulls over. We jump out of the car. There's 3 people trapped in this car. There was a big rock. Half the thing was completely flipped over. And there was that Indian music blaring out of it. You know, it was really strange. The high-pitched female voices. So it was very surreal. And they looked like they were Indian people. Blood everywhere. So they couldn't get out, because the window was blocked by the rock. So Dr. Omar, as God's my witness, this is a true story. Dr. Omar says to me, he probably would be upset with me telling this story, but it's a true story. He said to me, on the count of 3, I want you to pull them out. So he literally goes to the back of the Chevy Impala and he says, 1, 2, 3. And then he said, Allahu Akbar. And he lifted this car up. I swear to God, he lifted it up. And the window opened up, and I pulled these 3 people out of the car. I got blood I was literally covered in blood in this white robe. And we put them in the car, and then there's not enough room for me. So he drives off to get them to the hospital. And I'm sitting there next to a car flipped over with blood. My whole robe is covered in red blood. So I look like I've been in an accident. These people would stop on the road screaming, like, are you okay? Like, you need help? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm waiting for my friend to come back. Don't worry about me. It just was so strange. But that was a true story. So here's where it gets really interesting. So I go back, and I was really sad about losing this robe, which was a cotton robe that was hard to get. I actually had it made there. So we get back to Bashir, and I've got this bloody robe. And so he told me to give me the robe. So I gave it to him. The next day, they gave me back the robe folded up. I pull it out, nothing. It was like brand new. I could not believe it. And it was the same robe, which I don't know how he did that, but it was out. He gave me a beautiful subha before he died. And then he gave me a piece of the cloth that covered the Prophet's tomb, and he was a beautiful man. So anyway, we digressed.
I know, alhamdulillah. Yeah. MashaAllah. So that's where you met him in America too. So
I met him. Well, he's the one that brought me down